Welcome to Unleash the Awesome with Dave Gambrill. All of us have unique skills, talents, and abilities that aren't being used to their full potential. Our mission is to share the people, tools, apps, and other resources that will help you unleash your awesome on the world.
Yo, what's up? It's Dave. Welcome to another episode of Unleash the Awesome, and today it is story time because we're going to talk about Admiral William H. McRaven and when luck is defined as preparation meets opportunity. If you have no idea who Admiral William H. McRaven is, which, by the way, no, he's not going to be a guest on this podcast in this episode, although maybe in the future, we'll see. But Admiral McRaven is the #1 New York Times bestselling author. He had a new book that just came out called Wisdom of the Bullfrog, but he has other books called Make Your Bed and Sea Stories, My Life in the Special Operations, and The Hero Code, Lessons Learned from Lives Well Lived. In his 37 years as a Navy SEAL, he commanded at every level. As a 4-star admiral, his final assignment was as commander of all U.S. Special Operations Forces. So many of the big raids and operations that you saw, including the one to kill and capture Osama bin Laden, Admiral McRaven was in charge at that time. After retiring from the Navy, he served as a chancellor of the University of Texas System from 2015 to 2018, and he now lives in Austin, Texas, which is the setting of today's story. So if you've not checked out any of his books, you most definitely should do so, and you've probably seen his, or heard at least, his famous Make Your Bed speech that he gave, I believe, at the University of Texas in Austin. It's on YouTube. It's one of the most popular videos on YouTube. And again, he has a book that's called that. So let me set the stage for you here a little bit. Lots of teachable moments here. I had just listened to Wisdom of the Bullfrog probably a week before this episode I'm about to tell you about happened. This situation happened. And I listened to it in one sitting. I think it's like a 7-hour audiobook, and I listened to it at the gym for like 2 hours while I was there. And then I came home and continued to listen to it while I was in the shower and while I was doing errands around the house and taking care of all that stuff. And literally in one day, listened to it pretty much straight through for 7 hours. It's that good. And I'm a big fan of his work. And as a Navy veteran myself, as a hospital corpsman back in the day, I have a special appreciation for what goes on in the Special Forces and leadership of the military in general, and just some of the stories. I love that kind of stuff because I am one of them, and I can just relate to it, right? So, big fan of General McRaven, or Admiral McRaven, and it's not to say that I was ever like super excited to meet him or a fanboy or anything like that, or I was going to go out of my way to see him, but a big fan of his work. And I've reread some of his books a few times. So let's set the stage for you. I'm at an event in Austin, which is where he still lives, a few weeks ago. And there's a couple other events going on at this hotel. It's a big conference that I'm attending, that I'm a part of. And there's other conferences happening. It's in a huge hotel, like a 40-story hotel. And so I'm coming off the elevator, or getting on the elevator, and I was on one of the top floors. And as I was coming down, some other guy gets on the elevator from the other conference, and you could tell because of the lanyards we're all wearing, right? We're wearing these credentials. So I have credentials from the conference that I'm at. This other gentleman gets on the elevator from the different conference, and then we go one more floor down, and one of his buddies gets on. So 2 guys from the other conference. And the guy that gets on the elevator says to the other one that was already there, "Hey, when is the Admiral done speaking?" Elevator doors close. I kind of look at these 2 guys and I said, "Admiral?" And they said, "Yeah." And I said, "McRaven?" And the only reason I said that is because I figured he would be the one that would be on the speaking circuit right now, especially promoting his new book. And I know he does keynotes. And I also happen to know that he lived in Austin. So it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that it would be him because it was close for him. And they were like, and they were kind of like dismissive because they just didn't care. And they're like, "Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I don't know. He just went on." And it was at that moment that I was going down to go to my conference, to go to a different session, that I decided, you know what? I'm going to see if I can go listen to Admiral McRaven. I'm just going to slip into this conference and see if I can listen to his keynote. That would be amazing. And if they tell me no, fine. If they say, "No, what are you doing at this conference?" I'd be like, "Oh, sorry, my bad. I got off on the wrong floor," or whatever. But in that instant, as the elevator's still going down, I didn't have a lot of time to think about it because now we're not stopping on any floor. We're just going straight to their conference, and their conference was 2 floors above the one I was on. So the doors open, these guys get off, and I'm like, here we go. So I get off the elevator. I just decide, let's go. So I get into their kind of conference area, look around. Our lanyards look similar, but you could tell they're different. And nobody's really paying attention. So I just follow these guys and just slip right into the keynote. And Admiral McRaven is already speaking. And there's people standing up. I mean, if you've been to these conferences, you know there's usually people standing along the walls and in the back. And then there's usually empty seats, things like that. And then there's also usually like a VIP section up front. And in this case, for this conference, they had like really nice chairs for the people that were in the VIP section. So it wasn't about to push my luck. I was just like, you know what? I'll stand here along the wall for a little bit and just watch. And it sounds to me like I got in right towards the beginning of it because he was setting the stage for a lot of the stories he was telling. And after a while, I just decided, well, there's some seats over there. I'm just going to go sit down. So I didn't go up to the big cushy VIP seats, but I sat in the regular section. I just thought, wow, this is cool. I get to check out his keynote. It's dark in there, so nobody can see my lanyard now anyway. Like, who's going to ask me to leave? This is great. So I'm sitting there taking in the conference, taking in his keynote. I'm starting to take notes on my phone, actually. A lot of good stuff he was talking about, a lot of revisiting some of the stories from his books. And it was awesome. And again, as a Navy veteran myself, it was great to hear him. And as he was wrapping up, I thought to myself, it'd be really cool if I could meet him. So what is my strategy here going to be to meet him? And I kind of know these things, having interviewed a bunch of keynote speakers and things like that in these big settings at these big conferences. I know that typically when they're done speaking, they're going to go off stage. They might meet with some VIPs. They might do a meet and greet. They might shuttle them through the kitchen area so nobody can see them, but it's unlikely that they're going to take them right back out kind of to the common area of the conference where everybody is. So I left the keynote when it was done and I stepped out to the general area in the conference, and I was sitting there just thinking to myself, like, okay, maybe he's going to come out here, but probably not. They either escorted him through the kitchen, out the back door, and no one's ever going to see him, right? Because if that's in his contract or whatever, that's just get me out of here, then that's what they're going to do. And typically at these events, these keynote speakers have what are referred to as handlers or escorts or whatever you want to call them, that are people from the conference that will just make sure these people get to the elevator, out to their car, and get out of there without having a ton of interaction with other people, because if not, they get just hounded by people who want pictures and autographs and all that jazz, right? Including somebody like me in this case. So I'm thinking to myself, like, what would I be doing if I were them right now? I wouldn't have him come out here. And I thought, you know what? Maybe they're doing a meet and greet right back there on stage, or a photo op or something like that, or maybe he's signing books. I don't know. Let's go see. So I go back into the room and I notice there's a line of people, and he's back out on the stage and they're doing photo ops. And I assume this was probably for the VIP people. And if you've never been to an event like this, one of the things that happens when you're going to go up on stage and get your picture taken, you take your credentials off, you take your lanyard off, because you don't want that to be in the picture. So there's a line of, 20, 30 people maybe off to the side of the stage, and nobody has lanyards on. And so I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go get in that line, because why not? Who's going to tell me to leave? Maybe they'll ask me to show my credentials, but nobody has them on. So let's just try. Okay, so I get in the line, I'm hanging out there for a little bit. I notice nobody else has their credentials on. I put mine in my pocket. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get to meet Admiral McRaven. This is really cool. And maybe get my picture taken with him. But I noticed there was, and this is a key takeaway here, there's some social engineering and some influence, the psychology of persuasion from Dr. Robert Cialdini that I've referenced a number of times on this podcast. As I'm standing there in line, it's taking them a fair amount of time to do each picture. You can tell this is not something they're rehearsed at. I've been at many conferences where it was going much faster. The line was moving much faster. This one was moving slowly. And he was talking for a few seconds to each of the people. It wasn't just like smile and get out of there, which many of these things are usually set up like that. And so I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm not going to get these pictures because I'm not part of this conference. And I don't know how they're going to send them out. And I'm certainly not in the VIP thing. Like, what in the world? So I said to these two women who were in front of me, I said, hey, you know what? Who knows when we're going to get these pictures? And there might only be one, and our eyes could be closed. Like, and that would be really sucky, like if that happened. So how about this? When you go up there to get your picture taken, I'll take my phone out and I'll take a whole bunch of pictures of you up there. So you'll have a bunch to choose from, and then we'll have them immediately when we're done. And so when you get off stage, we can just airdrop them. And I'll do that if you'll do that for me. So when you're done and you come off stage, you just turn around and take a whole bunch of pictures for me. And they're like, man, that's the greatest idea ever. Okay. So this right here is just a bunch of stuff around social engineering, being friendly, building up some reciprocity, right? I didn't ask her to take pictures of me initially. I said, I'll take pictures of you. She's like, that's a great idea. And authority, right? So I'm just like, hey, this is a good idea. Maybe we should do this. I'm not second guessing it. I'm just going, hey, let's try this thing. So she goes, yeah, that's a great idea. And the other lady's like, yeah, that's a good idea too. Will you take some pictures of me? Sure, that'll be great. So they go up there after a while. Oh, and there's a guy behind me who brought in some copies of his books that he wanted to get signed, but it didn't look like he was signing them. And some of the other guys in line, he had a bunch of me, like 5 or 6 of them. And some of the people in line were like being helpful and said, hey, do you want me to get it signed? And who do you want me to get signed to, right? So they were going to help this guy get as many of his books signed as possible. So like everybody's conspiring to work together here. It's a great thing. And the other thing is, I forgot to mention this audience, like these people were not, from the impression that I got, like part of a certification program. They were all vendors, were all customers of this company that was putting on this show, this conference. And so I got the impression that they didn't really know each other unless they knew them or met them at this conference, because they were all from all different things, huge institutions like education systems, hospitals, like school districts, stuff like that, colleges, whatever. And so they were all kind of talking with each other. Everybody's working together. It was great. So I'm like, let me just work in here and do this thing. So anyway, these women in front of me get up there. I take their pictures. I walk up there and Admiral McRaven's like, hey, how you doing? And I said, I'm doing great. I introduced myself with my military designation, HM3 Gambrill, which he identified immediately as a doc. They call hospital corpsmen a doc because that's the medical support you have in the Navy, and also the Marines use hospital corpsmen as well. So he said, hey, doc, how you doing? And I said, well, I'm doing really well, considering 1, I'm not a participant at this conference, and 2, I certainly should not be up here meeting you in this VIP photo op line. He looks at me and starts laughing hysterically. At this point, I thought, I'm getting thrown out. But I also thought, I'm getting my picture taken. That lady down there is taking pictures, so at least I'll have that. Then we exchanged some words, which I'm not going to repeat here, which were pretty funny. But it was like some military playfulness and jargon. And he basically congratulated me on my ability to just go up there and just decide like, hey, I'm going to get my picture taken. And instead of him rejecting it outright, he embraced the whole idea of like, whoa. I said, listen, your keynote was, part of it was about like taking acceptable risks and stuff, right? So here I am. And I love your work. I told him I'd listen to his book, in one sitting and all that stuff. And he's like, oh, that's really cool. So we turn and get our picture taken from the photographer, which I'll never get that picture. And then I'm like, okay, I'm done. I've made it. This is cool, right? Have like this adrenaline high. And I'm getting ready to walk off the stage. And he like stops me. And he's like, oh, where were you stationed? And so I start answering some questions. And he talks about some stuff. And he's like, oh, yeah, I was there one time and blah, blah, blah. And then he asked me a couple other things. And he probably talked to me 3 times as long as he talked to anybody else. So remember, I'm not supposed to be there in the first place. But I guess because my military background as a veteran, whatever, both being in the Navy, we're bonding a little bit. And he just, I guess, thought this whole thing was hilarious. And so we had a few more words, exchanged words. This lady literally took, not kidding, like 50 pictures of me while I was up there. So as I'm walking off stage, they also hand me an autographed copy of his one of his books, Make Your Bed. And I'm like, I don't know if I should take this because I don't belong here in the first place. But I looked behind me and then looked at the stack of books. And I'm like, okay, there's only 5 or 6 people behind me. And there's like still 20 books here. So we're probably okay. And I didn't want to make any waves or anything. So I'm just like, okay. So I took the book. And then I exchanged photos with these other women. We airdropped them. And I thought, this is really amazing. So I'm sitting there like having this emotional high. It was cool. I got to meet him. It was never anything that was, again, like on my bucket list or anything. It wasn't like I was going to go out of my way to meet him. But it was pretty cool, pretty amazing. And this is this idea of like, I believe, and I've heard him define this as well. I don't know who to give this quote, who to attribute this quote to, but this idea of like, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right? So like, I have been part of these conferences before. Like I said, I've been behind the scenes of these things. I've been on stage to interview people. I've given my own keynotes myself. So I know how all this stuff works. I also understand the social engineering part of these things and the influence part of these things. So I've been doing a lot of this stuff, working a lot of this stuff, preparing for an opportunity like this, even though I didn't know this opportunity was going to present itself, but it did. And within an instant on the elevator, I had to decide whether or not I was going to shoot my shot. Like, when else was I ever going to get a chance to meet him or just see him? I wasn't even planning initially on meeting him. And I just thought, okay, let's take the shot. What's the worst that's going to happen? They'll tell me to leave, right? So right away, I had to shoot my shot, went in there, and then had to do it again and decide, like, whoa, okay, this is a higher level of risk, but let me try it. Again, what's the worst that's going to happen? They'll be like, oh, you don't belong here, get out of here, right? But that never happened. So, of course, I go put myself in the VIP photo op line, get to meet him, have a conversation. I think that's amazing. It's really great. Talking to these ladies, I am still like on this crazy adrenaline high. And I go out to the kind of the main conference area there and sit on a couch. And these other two guys that were on the elevator with me were like, did you just get your picture taken with him? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, what? So we're exchanging stories. And they thought it was pretty funny that I did that because they knew I didn't even belong at that conference. And we're sharing all those stories. And then I thought, okay, this is great. I can't wait to go tell people about this. This was like an amazing hour of my life. Really cool. One of the highlights of the whole conference, and it wasn't even the conference that I was at. And I go to the elevator banks, and this hotel I told you is pretty big. They had 2 big elevator banks of 4 elevators. And so I was in one of them. They're standing out, waiting for an elevator to go up. And I didn't realize that Admiral McRaven had slipped in behind me and got in on an elevator that was going down. And so by the time I turned around and made eye contact with him, he was already in the elevator and had his back in the elevator. So he was looking out. And as the doors were closing, we made eye contact, and we again exchanged some words that I'm not going to repeat here, but were pretty funny. But basically what he was saying, and I'm paraphrasing a lot, was, that was pretty amazing, Doc. I can't believe you pulled that off. This is something that I'll remember. That was pretty funny. Like, salute to you, basically. Although he said it much more concisely in words that I'm not going to repeat. But it was just so funny because then that was the closing moment. Like, literally the elevator doors are closing. We're like locked eyes with each other. He exchanged these words and I was like, hey, thanks, Admiral. Like, have a good day, right? And the doors closed. Boom. And that was kind of the end of the story. And then as I went back to my conference, I knew a lot of the people there and I was telling them that story and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. And this one person that I know really well at that conference says, man, that story is so on brand for you. That is so on brand. And I was like, you know what? It kind of is. Because if you think about this podcast, right, it's called Unleash the Awesome. I often talk about things like taking acceptable risk and doing big things and not conforming to the norms and doing things that are amazing. Like, that was an opportunity that I had to create an awesome moment for me. And in the instant on the elevator, I had to make a very quick decision, right? And I believe that people who are successful in this world are able to make decisions quickly. And so, like, I was literally going down to my conference. I knew what session was coming up. I mean, if I had to speak at that panel, or if I was, going to be a keynote speaker, obviously I couldn't have done it, but I wasn't going to be. And I decided right then, like, all right, I'm going to have access to the replays for my conference. When else am I going to have this opportunity? So I had to go through all this calculus really fast as the elevator's going down. And then I just decided, shoot your shot. Let's go. And so my question is, like, when have you had opportunities where you failed to shoot your shot? What I started thinking was I've heard Jeff Bezos refer to this as the regret minimization framework, which is just a fancy way for, like, you regret a lot of the things that you don't do, right? You as you look back in life, as you're 80 years old and you look back on your life, you're going to regret the chances you didn't take. You're going to regret the shots you didn't take more than the things you did, and maybe they didn't go as well as you wanted them to. So, like, all of that stuff was kind of going through my head. And a lot of the stuff I talk about on this podcast was like in an instant, just, and I thought, okay, let's go, shoot your shot. Like, when else are you going to have this opportunity? Like, this was amazing. In 1 second, I didn't know that this was a possibility, to, oh my gosh, he's here and I would love to hear his keynote, to then, oh my gosh, this would be amazing, I might have a chance to meet him, to, oh my gosh, I'm getting my picture taken and he continues to talk to me, which is pretty amazing, to, we share another funny moment as he's leaving the hotel going in the elevator, right? None of those things happen if I don't make the quick decision to shoot my shot and do it and take the risk, right? So the big overarching thing here, there's 2 of them. One, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I've been to these things before. I've done these things before. I know how they work. I understand social engineering. I understand credentials at conferences. I understand all of that stuff, right? So like, it wasn't my first rodeo, as they say, right? So I'd kind of been preparing in that regard, but I also had been preparing to take acceptable risks, right? I very quickly weighed the upside and the downside. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to ask me to leave, right? I mean, I guess they could have like arrested me for trespassing or something. I don't know, but I doubt they would have gone to that level because I would have been like, oh, sorry. Okay, bye. So I decided it was an acceptable risk. The upside was great. The downside was small, right? So this is great when you can, especially as an investor, if you can have this kind of thing, right? When the upside is really big, but the downside is small, right? The risk reward differential is pretty great. So I'm like, okay, let's do it, right? So that the first takeaway is shoot your shot. The second one is like, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So like if you're working on things, if you're on the path, if you're doing these things and something happens, an opportunity comes up, then you're much more likely to want to and be able to shoot your shot and be successful because you've been preparing these things. And then I guess the last big takeaway is then you just have to do it, right? And at no point in this process was I like, I shouldn't be doing this. I just like, okay, I'm here. They pretend like I belong here. Let's go. Let's like slip right in and do it and see what happens. And I did. And then I had the presence of mind to document a fair amount of it. So I was like taking pictures while I was in the keynote. And then I took a couple pictures while I was standing in line for the VIP thing and actually sent one to some people that I know, and while I was waiting in line, and they're like, oh, of course you are. Of course you just slipped into the VIP line. Like, essentially, that's so on brand for you, right? And then going through this whole process and having this experience. So, and I guess the last takeaway is like, you can't have opportunities like this. You can't do things like this. You can't have awesome stuff if you aren't willing to take action and take the risk and put yourself in an uncomfortable situation. So this whole thing was uncomfortable from the outset. I'm like, oh yeah, I don't belong there. I'm not part of this conference. And, you know, the trade-off I made in my head is some of you are probably like, yeah, but like you didn't belong there and these people paid to be there and whatever. Like I did that calculus too. And I was like, you know what? This was not one of those conferences where people paid to be there. They were customers of this company. And so, yeah, they paid to be there, to fly there and whatever, but I didn't get the impression that there was like an admission fee, like they were paying like for a concert ticket or something. It was like they were invited to come to this conference. Maybe there was some fee, I don't know, but it seemed like this company that was hosting it was rewarding their top customers and vendors. And it was one of those kind of things. And so I was like, okay, fine. Like, we'll just go in there and figure this out. And again, what's worse going to happen? They're going to ask me to leave. So think about that kind of stuff as you're going through life, as you're doing things on a day-to-day basis. Like when are you going to be able to shoot your shot? Like when is an opportunity like this going to show up for you? And the question you have to ask yourself now is, will you be ready and will you take that chance? Will you shoot your shot? Will you put yourself in a situation to get whatever it is? Because I guarantee stuff like this will happen to you. You'll have opportunities where, whether it's meeting a celebrity or somebody you admire, or an opportunity to get a job, or an opportunity to like get backstage at a concert or something like that, or get, you know, somebody who's going to give you VIP credentials to the Olympics or some other big sporting event. Like there will be situations, if you're out there living your life, there will be situations that will happen to you where an opportunity is going to come up and you are going to have to take some level of acceptable risk, whatever that is for you, and take action. You're going to have to put yourself in a position to be successful. And if you do that, the chances of whatever it is you want to have happen will happen. But it's not going to happen if you just sit back, if you're on your heels, if you don't take action, if you just kind of watch it transpire in front of you, right? You have to be bold, right? Fortune favors the bold. If you want something amazing to happen, if you want to unleash the awesome for you and the people around you and the circumstances around you, then you have to take some effort on your part to step into that and put yourself in a position to make it happen. I could have just been happy with getting to access the keynote, and that would have been great. And I thought, well, I'm already here. Is there a chance to meet him? Let me push a little further and see what happens. And so I did that, and I continued to kind of push and push and push. And who knows, if he was still at the thing and he had like a luncheon or a dinner, maybe I would have tried to invite myself to that. I don't know. But I kept putting myself in a position to at least have a chance, right? And there's so many times in our life, there's so many times in our personal life, there's so many times in our business where we do not give ourselves a shot because we won't put ourselves in a position to win. We don't even give ourselves that opportunity. Even though they're all around us, we're either too shy or too worried or too risk averse, and we sit back and we don't take that action to put us in a situation to win. So in this case, very quickly, I had to decide to put myself in a position for this to happen. And then I had to put myself in another position for it to up level even more and to create an awesome experience for me. So my question to you is, when the opportunity comes for you, will you be prepared to step into it and take positive action and shoot your shot so that you can unleash your awesome in that situation? See ya.
Thanks for listening to Unleash the Awesome. Please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please share us on your favorite social media platforms using #UnleashAwesome.